The millionaire's daughter was mute until she drank a mysterious liquid from a black girl and the impossible happened. From birth, Kara Sutton had never uttered a sound. The finest doctors stood around her crib, listening, measuring before handing down a verdict as cold as steel she would never speak. Some destinies are signed off too soon. That morning, sunlight draped thinly over Central Park. A saxophone hummed a short blues, pretzel carts leaked the scent of butter and salt, children chased pigeons across the steps of Bethesda Terrace. Amid the ordinary rhythm, one figure looked out of place. Leonard Sutton, dark blue suit. Swiss watch gleaming cold, the stride of a man used to command. He spoke curtly into his phone. Close the deal. No excuses. Then, with a habitual gesture, he stepped aside, leaving Kara standing on the stone floor polished like a mirror. Kara watched the world with questioning eyes. She touched the wooden bench, still warm from the sun. While Leonard turned away to take another call, a small voice, soft as a breeze, threading through leaves, floated beside her. "Hey? I'm Ivy. You look kinda alone, mind if I hang here?" It was Ivy Brooks, a black girl about Kara's age. Her hoodie was faded but clean, her old shoes scrubbed as if pride itself had polished them. Braided hair, eyes warm and steady, the kind of steadiness one only learns from protecting fragile things. Kara looked up. She didn't speak, but her eyes invited stay. Ivy understood. "You don't have to talk. I'll just stay okay." She reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a small glass vial. Sunlight fractured on its surface, the liquid inside golden as honey. Ivy lowered her voice as if placing a secret in someone's hand. "My grandma taught me this. She called it liquid gold. Drink, and your voice will be born. Some moments exist only to be tested." Leonard spun around. A father's fear tangled with a tycoon's reflex for control. He lunged his hand, jerking so sharply, the vial slipped from Ivy's fingers, crashing onto the stone. Shards exploded. The bitter scent of herbs filled the air, clinging like a warning. Leonard pulled Kara behind him, shoving Ivy back. "What do you think you're doing?" His voice cut like glass alien in a park. Kara clutched her throat, eyes wet from coughing and fear. Ivy raised her hands quickly. "I was just enough." Leonard snapped, scanning Ivy as if sweeping away a threat. He bent over Kara, hands trembling slightly, though his face stayed fixed in the hardened mask he had worn for years. And then, just when everything seemed frozen, a sound cracked open the silence of 5 long years. Kara inhaled, lips trembling as if prying open a locked door. Leonard stopped cold. Some words, when awaited long enough, drop, heavier than a lifetime. Kara tried again, reaching what no money could buy. Daddy, the man who once commanded markets, dropped to his knees. For the first time in years, he forgot the posture of power. "Say it again, please." His voice rasped, strange even to him. Kara burrowed into his chest, her second word, fuller, clearer. "Daddy." Tears rose, not for failure, not for success, but for something that should have arrived long ago, finally finding its way. Ivy stood at the sunlit edge of the steps, witness to a seedling breaking ground. She didn't ask, didn't claim the miracle. She only whispered just loud enough for a listener of hearts. "Keep it safe, okay? Use it right." Then the crowd folded her back into its flow, as if the magic already knew its path. The park resumed its pulse. The saxophonist picked up his melody again, slower. But the old order had cracked, not just the shattered vial, but a measure Leonard had trusted all his life, that money and commands always win. He lifted Kara into his arms. "Daddy." "I'm happy," she murmured, breath still uneven. Joy came fast like a warm wind, and as all true joys demand, it asked him in return, "How will you use this gift?" The driver opened the car door. As the vehicle pulled from the park, sunlight still streamed. The bitter herbal scent lingered like a question unsolved. What lay inside that tiny vial that medicine, money, and power could not touch? Leonard had no answer. He only held his daughter tighter, afraid if he let go, her daddy would dissolve into air. Somewhere deep within him, a shadow stirred awake, the shadow of possession. Such shadows seldom shout. They only wait patient for a chance to set a price. The penthouse on Fifth Avenue had always been a sleek, solitary block of glass. Tonight it was warm. The oven breathed softly. Kitchen lights glowed golden. On the marble counter, knife marks lined up neatly across fresh bread. Kara sat on a high chair, legs swinging to her own rhythm. She looked at the slice, then at her father. "Daddy, I want bread," each consonant like a pebble, laid down slowly but surely. "Oh my God, you're really speaking," Leonard whispered, his hand, once used to signing cold numbers, now brushing her hair as if afraid of dropping a snowflake. The staff froze at the threshold. Rarely had they seen their employer reveal anything beyond command. Now they saw a father. No one clapped. They exchanged a glance as if to say the most ordinary thing, a child speaking, had turned out to be the greatest miracle. Kara tried another step. "I'm happy." "Me too." Leonard answered the word too, falling into the apartment like a warm drop, melting years of frost. Dinner became a small ceremony. Kara practiced simple words. Each syllable broke open like a window unlatched. Leonard, the man who never gave anyone more than 10 seconds, sat waiting for every sound as if it were a pulse of life. And in that waiting, he heard something he hadn't in years, his own silence, the kind money could not fill. Yet joy rarely travels alone. It brings questions, and questions in the hands of a man of control easily turn into plans. When dinner ended, the city outside glowed like a circuit board. Kara leaned against his shoulder. "Tomorrow, the park. I want to say thank you." The word "thank you" touched Leonard like a finger pressed to a barely healed scar. He nodded. "We'll go. We'll find her." Perhaps to Kara his nod was a simple promise, but adults rarely keep promises and desires on the same straight path. Kara fell asleep early, her rest deep, as though years of silence demanded repayment in peace. Leonard pulled the blanket over her and lingered by the bed, listening to the rhythm of her breath, a sound no contract could ever command. Then he went to the library. Desk light spilled across the wood, revealing fresh thoughts. He didn't write a plan right away. First memory returned, the golden glow inside the vial, the bitter scent still hovering in the Bethesda air, the small black girl's hand clutching her sleeve when she was pushed away. Only after that did old habits creep back, measuring, labeling, calculating. A phrase sprouted inside him like a seed, not yet knowing what tree it would become. Hope. Tea. He stopped. Some words if spoken too soon ruin the sacred. Ivy had said, "Keep it safe, use it right." Kara had said, "Thank you." Placed rightly, those two phrases could keep the miracle clean. Misplaced, they would be priced, and what is priced will always be bargained. Night slid across the glass. Somewhere, the Hudson struck a soft beat. Leonard closed his notebook, turned off the lamp, and returned to his daughter's room. He lingered in the doorway, watching the gentle glow. Perhaps he already knew tomorrow Central Park would hand him back a chance to do right, a chance he had missed for years in his pursuit of becoming larger. But perhaps tomorrow, too, the urge to possess the shadow, now stirring, would find a way to set a price on what should never be priced. A home changes when a voice arrives, not only because of sound, but because the moral order shifts. The penthouse, once attuned only to the hum of air conditioning, had learned to hear a human voice. And Leonard, who once believed everything could be bottled now, faced something forbidden. Name it too soon, and he would lose it. Hold it with gratitude, and it might stay. Beyond the wall, Kara turned in her sleep. In her dream, she and Ivy sat at the fountain's edge, dipping their hands into the cool water. She spoke smooth and fearless. "Thank you." At the dream's edge, a whisper drifted the kind grown-ups often forget. "Don't sell hope. Give it." And so, the first night of spoken words passed through the Fifth Avenue penthouse, leaving behind a question, one that the days ahead would force each person in the story to answer not with words, but with how they treated the miracle. The next morning, New York opened its eyes to sunlight clear as new. Central Park murmured its familiar sounds, stroller wheels bumping on stone, a dog barking sharp before quieting at a soft shh, a saxophone shifting into a swing light as a broom sweeping dust. Leonard Sutton held Kara's hand, walking slower than usual. Not because he had suddenly grown fond of leisure, but because something fragile had been given the night before, and speed now felt like a threat. He had promised to return to give thanks. Promises, when spoken by adults, often lose a syllable or two along the way, but today he kept it whole. Kara tugged his hand. Daddy, the fountain, there. Bethesda Terrace unfolded almost too beautiful to be real. Golden stone water falling in threads, little boats swaying in the distance. Ivy Brooks stood at the edge of the steps, arms wrapped around the morning breeze. Her hoodie was still faded, her shoes still worn, but something new glowed on her face. After last night, the light of someone who had seen a miracle without needing anyone to name it. Kara let go and ran. "Thank you for giving me my voice." She hugged Ivy, a child's embrace that needed no ceremony. Ivy smiled, nodding, simply. "You kept it safe. That matters." In that instant, the park seemed to hold its breath. The right things often do that, they make the whole world pause to let them settle into place. Leonard arrived after, hand on his daughter's shoulder, eyes meeting Ivy's. Apologies stumble on the tongue of those unaccustomed to lowering their voice. "I'm sorry about yesterday," he said, each word stacked carefully. Ivy looked back, neither shrinking nor proud calm as a guard at the door of a fragile room. She nodded, nothing more. Forgiveness is sometimes just a nod, no speech required. But Leonard sought more than forgiveness. A question had gnawed at him all night, patient as a wolf chewing the edge of a bone. "What was in that bottle?" he asked, voice low. Kara turned to, her eyes eager and bright. "Yes, tell us, please." Ivy fell silent for a moment, as if peering into a room of memories whose door might best remain closed. Then she spoke slowly, carefully, like teaching a child to read. "It was a tea. My grandma taught me, a family remedy. She called it liquid gold. She did not say magic, she said heritage. Some words are born never to enter the marketplace." Leonard heard tea, and his shoulders dropped half a centimeter. Tea sounded like something that could be named, measured, bottled. Tea meant process. In his mind, old gears began to turn. Storytellers often know when someone sees a miracle and thinks of scales, a price is about to be set. "Come with us," Leonard said, his voice smooth as pressed silk. "Be our guest. We want to thank you properly." Properly carried, a thin blade inside it, sliced between gratitude and possession. Kara chimed in, "Ivy, please, come children. In joy only know to pull those they love into warmth. They do not think of cages." Ivy looked at Kara's face, a look impossible to refuse once you'd seen Daddy fall from such small lips. She hesitated. Her small frame leaned between trust and caution. At last she nodded. "Okay, for a bit, just for a bit." Kara repeated, as if sealing the promise for the whole world. Adults sign contracts with pens. Children sign with repeats like this. A black car waited by the park's edge. The driver opened the door. Kara and Ivy sat side by side in the back hands, touching as if to keep something new from slipping away. The city slid past the windows of hot dog vendors, an old woman pushing a market cart, a group of school kids shouting across the crosswalk. The Fifth Avenue penthouse greeted them with polished wood and the hush of air conditioning. Crossing that threshold was crossing a line this side held warmth for the few, the other side sun and wind for the many. Not everyone notices the line when they pass it. The living room shone as if more daylight had been poured in. Staff arranged fruit pastries, cheese. An old piano stood silent in the corner, a witness waiting to be called. "This home is yours, today," Leonard said, his smile like ink on glossy paper. Kara pulled Ivy down beside her, awkward but thrilled. "Try the strawberries. They're sweet." Ivy bit into one. Sugar and sunlight burst together. Simple things eaten at a table, not meant for you, often taste of questions. The day unfolded in hours that glittered. The two girls ran through the rooftop garden wind, tossing their hair up and dropping it again. They tapped piano keys, a clumsy chord ringing out like a knock on a door. Leonard watched, appearing every bit the father. But behind his gaze, a window opened into another room, the room of experiments. He took no photos, no recordings. He stored everything in memory, the one hard drive least likely to face a lawsuit. Night fell, and the city lit its lamps. Ivy stood on the balcony, watching the streams of cars below like a river of metal. "It's beautiful," she said, "wonder breaking through." "It can be," Leonard replied, standing behind her, voice soft enough to suggest but not press. "Things are beautiful when used right." From another man it might have been wisdom. From him it carried the scent of conditions. Late, Kara slept in her white-draped room. Ivy was given a small guest room, clean sheets, towels folded into a bird. She lay down, then sat up again. Rooms too soft sometimes do not comfort the tired. She thought of her grandmother, brown hands lined with soap stories told by candlelight when the power went out. Liquid gold, she had called it, but always warned not for selling. For giving. Ivy clutched the blanket's edge. In a house warm as a palm, where was there space to keep that warning safe? Beyond the wall, Leonard sat alone. He did not open his laptop. He tried practicing fatherhood for one more night, like a man learning to stand still after years of only running. But across from him sat a shadow, smiling, just a little more. Ask a few more questions. Harmless ones. Soon it will all be clear. Soon we will think properly. The shadow wore a polite hat. It knew how to say please. Some stories once inside the homes of the wealthy change tempo. They move softer, speak less, and the most dangerous things make no sound. The night closed, and no one heard anything but the air conditioner. Yet, in the dreams of two children, Central Park stayed open, the fountain still falling. There, the right thing still had a place. The next morning, sunlight poured across the breakfast table. Fruit was cut into cubes like a game. Pancakes glistened with butter. Kara spoke her words, carrying the rhythm of a child who never counts. Beats, Ivy played the piano with me. The left hand was tricky. Ivy smiled, nodding. She was brave. Brave dropped into the middle of the elegant table like a seed landing in a greenhouse. Leonard waited until halfway through the meal to ask, pretending the thought had just arrived. "Ivy, about the tea, how did your grandma make it? I mean, not everything, if you don't want to just, I'm curious." Curious, the sweet word adults use when they want another layer. Ivy glanced at Kara. In a child's eyes, people can read maps adults refuse to open. Kara nodded softly, not because she understood it all, but because she trusted. Ivy set her spoon down, wiped her hands, a habit of those who guard what they carry. She picked sage and mint at dawn. She said the noon sun makes them tired. Leonard nodded, memorizing. Fresh ginger grated, wild honey, chamomile flowers. Another nod as though he had caught the refrain of a song. Then she simmered it for exactly 7 minutes, gentle heat not boiling. Kara's eyes widened. Exactly 7. Exactly, Ivy repeated, smiling the smile of gentle discipline. She let it cool in glass. Never metal. She said, metal steals something you can't see, and you drink it right away before it loses. She paused, searching for the word. Its essence. Essence. The word landed like someone had set a bell in the room. Leonard fell silent for a beat, long enough for the bell to ring again, then gave a careful smile. That's beautiful. Thank you. He asked nothing more. Those accustomed to taking know that grabbing too much at once makes noise. Taking a little many times, that is the art. The second day unfolded like a soft harmony, Kara and Ivy running down hallways, pausing to listen to their own echoes, sitting cross-legged on the floor, stacking wooden blocks into bridges and houses, then knocking them down to laugh. Staff delivered a bag of clothes for Ivy, soft dresses, new shoes with the smell of fresh leather, a coat lined with fur. For you, they said, polite as a lesson. Ivy touched the fabric, smiled her thanks, but her heart skipped strangely. Gifts, when piled too high, can harden into walls. That afternoon they went to the rooftop garden. The city below spread like a sheet of musical notes. Leonard sat on a bench opening a book he did not read. His eyes always drifted back to the two children. Anyone who has ever thought of profit knows before there is a product, there must be a story. Here the story wrote itself. A child spoke. For the first time another girl gave something unnamed. Leonard did not need to invent. He only needed to frame. Ivy, his voice came light as a plucked string. When your grandma taught you, did she say why it works? Ivy looked to the horizon. She remembered her grandmother's voice. It's not the leaves, child, but how they are given. Not the tea, but the promise that holds it. Slowly, she said, she told me, some things work when they are given right. Given right, Leonard echoed, as if tasting a new flavor. He did not comment further, but the phrase slid into another drawer in his mind, a drawer with a lock, opened only when the narrative is needed. That evening, Kara dragged Ivy into her father's study, show him the left-hand trick on the piano. Ivy laughed, shaking her head no. That room had a different scent, the smell of expensive wood, the ink of contracts, the leather of chairs, and a thin odor rarely named the smell of decisions. Ivy stood at the doorway, listening to Kara hit the wrong note, and burst into laughter hearing Leonard laugh along. Laughter can disguise a room, but some things inside don't laugh. That night, Ivy didn't sleep right away. She sat on the bed turning a small cloth in her hands, the faded cotton handkerchief she always carried worn thin by washings. She thought of the words she had spoken: sage, mint, ginger, honey, chamomile, 7 minutes glass immediate. She thought of the words she had held back, the instructions her grandmother gave while stirring the pot, while counting the minutes while watching the sun. Not everyone should know everything her grandmother had said. Partly to keep the gift clean, partly to keep the receiver safe. Ivy wasn't afraid for herself. She was afraid for the gift. In the next room, Leonard opened his laptop, then shut it again. He checked his schedule, a call with marketing, a lunch with someone who could turn a story into a campaign. He glanced at Kara, sleeping on the nanny cam he had always used the camera to control. Tonight, he used it to reassure. Perhaps that was the easiest way to atone to watch. But watching is never enough when the hands still measure. On the ceiling, the lamp reflected two small figures sleeping Kara, and beyond the wall Ivy. Leonard felt himself standing between them, like standing between two definitions, gratitude and possession. He told himself tomorrow just a few more questions. Harmless ones, to understand, to be certain. Adults like to call harmless the things that turn into wounds when carried a step too far. At midnight, the wind shifted. The city sounded like a living creature breathing. Kara stirred in her sleep, calling out in her dream, "Ivy." Ivy opened her eyes, not knowing why she had woken just then. She stepped onto the balcony, looking down at the traffic, flowing like glowing fish. She clasped her hands not in prayer, but to hold the thread between gratitude and price, between home and cage, between tea and miracle. Tomorrow, more questions would add another layer. And like every story that has ever passed through a greenhouse, tomorrow someone would place their hand on the latch. Then it would be known whether the beauty of today was a gift or only the first step of a purchase. The storyteller can say only this: in places where small things are put rightly, miracles tend to remain. In places where people count before they give, miracles often vanish without a sound. On the third morning, the penthouse opened its eyes to a layer of light soft as milk. Kara pulled Ivy down the long hallway, each footstep like a note just learned. "Show me the left hand again," Kara begged. Ivy laughed, leaned over, and let two small hands dance across the keys, a clumsy chord, but in the right place. The right things are often small, and because they are small, they are easily drowned out by the loudness of adults. Leonard appeared in the doorway, steam curling from a coffee cup in his hand. He stood still for a beat, like a father. Then he entered as a man with a question. "Ivy, that thing your grandma made, does the dawn matter that much?" His voice light as a dust cloth. "Yes," Ivy replied without pause. She said, "Leaves listen better before the world gets loud." Leonard nodded the nod of a man making notes. "And the honey wild, you said, from which region?" She didn't call it regions, she called it paths. Ivy smiled, remembering her grandmother's brown hands bees moving through fields, not markets. "We got it from a neighbor outside the city." At noon, the rooftop garden whispered with leaves. Leonard set a tray of lemonade on the wicker table, sat at an angle as if to catch the sun, but in truth, to catch something else. 7 minutes is precise. Did she count by clock or by feel? By clock. Ivy answered, then added quickly as if afraid to spoil the sacred with omission. But she listened to the simmer too. It has to sound gentle. Gentle, a word, falling between exactly and clock, bridging science with the softer order her grandmother had taught. The day drifted like a ribbon of light. Kara and Ivy built houses with wooden blocks, then toppled them laughing until their cheeks ached. The staff brought more gifts, new shoes, a soft coat, a teddy bear with a blue bow. Ivy thanked them, hugged the bear to her chest, and suddenly heard a faint knock inside herself. Too many gifts become walls, and walls when painted warm are the hardest to notice. That evening, the study door stood ajar. Inside, the dark wood desk shone like a night lake. Leonard's tone was bright, but only just, I might help more kids like Cora, if I understand this right. Help, a word that quietly changes coats from angel's cloak to businessman's suit. But only if it's used right, Ivy replied, her grandmother's words returning, not for selling. For giving. Leonard smiled, of course. Used right. He did not argue, he recorded. Deep inside a corner of him measured the profit margin of the word right. At midnight, the city breathed with its lights. Leonard sat alone looking over old project files, hearing Kara shift in her sleep through the nanny cam. He opened a blank page, not to write Hope Tea, for he had learned to tame his haste, but to jot harmless questions for the morning, the density of leaves in a cup, the strength of ginger, the ratio of honey, the industrial equivalent of gentle heat. He wrote small as if afraid to wake someone sleeping in the house. In the guest room, Ivy clutched the teddy bear. She unfolded the faded cotton handkerchief. Each frayed line was a story. Blackout nights her grandmother telling tales, setting a pot on the gas stove saying, "Some gifts don't work when you put a price on them." Ivy closed her eyes. In a house warm as a palm, where could she hide that warning so it wouldn't be renamed? The next morning, Leonard's questions came prettier, no longer blunt words but framed as requests. "Would you show me the simmer? I want to hear what gentle means." He handed her a small pot, a glass jar. No labels, no machines, only a stove and time. Ivy stared into the empty pot. It was the place where the sacred could be set or stolen. She nodded, not because she trusted, but because she needed to see where the line was. The kitchen opened to sunlight. Ivy poured water, let sage and mint fall, scattered grated, ginger-touched honey, dropped chamomile. Steam rose carrying a bitter-sweet haze like the beginning of a story. "Listen," Ivy said. "If it's too loud, it steals. If it's too quiet, it sleeps. Gentle is in between." Leonard leaned in. He truly listened, and in that moment part of him truly learned. Then his eyes flicked to the clock. 7 minutes. When she poured it into glass, Ivy sealed it with words, "Glass, not metal," and right away, or it loses its essence. Leonard finished a small smile. He had memorized the melody. He hadn't asked everything, but he already held a draft. There are questions meant to learn and questions meant to frame. Leonard's questions in these early days lived between those two borders between gratitude and price. The storyteller sees questions passing through the gate of thanks are soft. Questions through the gate of profit are sharp. That morning in the Fifth Avenue kitchen, both doors opened. They made a strange wind. It was cool. It was also cold. By afternoon, Cora dozed on the sofa, teddy bear covering half her face. Ivy tucked a blanket over her, then turned to meet Leonard's eyes. He spoke softly, as though not to wake something sleeping. "Thank you. You've been very generous." Generous, a word that flipped over, reveals sleight of hand. Ivy nodded. Inside a lock turned halfway, she decided here's the line. Here, the story has more doors than she wished. And just as Ivy prepared to say, "Tomorrow, I'll go home," an appointment slipped quietly through the door. That afternoon, the air grew heavy like a house wearing a wool sweater in mid-July. Kara was asleep. A staff member appeared. "Mr. Sutton would like to see you in the study." Study, the room Ivy had always stayed outside of. She followed each step like pressing down on a sheet of glass. The door closed behind her with a small click. The room was quiet in an unhealthy way. A lamp spilled light across the wide wooden desk. On it sat a duffel bag. No logo, no introduction, only weight. Leonard stood on the far side of the desk, hand resting on the chair's edge, the posture of someone delivering a verdict. "Ivy," he began, voice smooth as polished wood, "you gave me what I needed." He pushed the duffel forward. "Take this and go. I never asked for money." Ivy said, her voice small as a bell placed in a room too large. "I just wanted to be Kara's friend." Leonard didn't raise an eyebrow, only pressed on, "You've been a guest here, and you've been helpful. But from now on, there's no reason to stay." No reason. The phrase didn't just dismiss, it erased. It said you were a tool, the use is done, the person is done. Ivy didn't cry. She looked at the duffel the way one looks at a definition, a measure offered for something that should never be measured. "Then let me say goodbye to Kara," she pleaded. "No," Leonard answered, voice sharp as a line drawn across a page. "She's sleeping. It's better this way." Better this way, 4 words adults often use to shift the burden off their own shoulders. Ivy turned. Leonard's hand pressed the front door open, spilling into the marble-lit foyer. She stepped to the threshold, then stopped speaking without turning back. Keep her voice safe. Use it right. It was the kind of thing people say when their part in the story is finished, but their warning remains. Leonard gave no reply. He only widened the door like opening a cargo gate not a way home. Kara came running like a startled bird at the snap of the lock. Her hair flew into her eyes, the teddy bear dropped and rolled across the floor. "Dad, what?" The question broke when she saw Ivy at the threshold. "Wait, don't go." Kara lunged, but the door was faster. "Dad, stop. She doesn't deserve this." A 5-year-old's stop rarely halts the hand of a man accustomed to pushing. "Out," Leonard said. Not loud, but final. The door hit its frame with a dull thud. Ivy stood outside, palm against the wood like laying a hand on the back of a beast she would never call her own. She breathed in, turned to the glass pane, and spoke to Kara. "Don't cry. You have what you always wanted, your voice. Keep it safe." Then she lifted the duffel, not because it was worth anything, but because walking empty-handed through this neighborhood could be misunderstood in dangerous ways. Kara shattered. "I hate you, Dad." The words flew through the foyer like a verdict. They didn't sound like childish sulking. They carried the weight of something born already with teeth. Leonard did not flinch. Somewhere in his mind, a ledger turned a page benefit market story scalability. In the instant, a child chose loyalty, a man chose profit. Ivy stepped down the stone stairs, sunlight pressing on her shoulders like a hand. She didn't look back. In houses like this, looking back is often a concession. The gate opened onto the avenue. The city breathed in her face, gas fumes, slices of pizza, the smell of people. A thin mist of rain began, the kind that sprays the air and gives everything a glowing edge. Ivy pulled up her hood, hugging the duffel like a dictionary, heavy with words in a language she didn't want to learn. Inside, Leonard stood at the door he had just closed. He didn't tremble, didn't strain, didn't step back. He stared across the hall, saw a mirror on the opposite wall. In the mirror was a man in control. And behind that man, if one stared long enough, letters forming labels story launch. Far off, Times Square seemed like a screen not yet switched on ads, ready to use light to cover bitterness. Kara sank onto the floor, teddy bear face down beside her. She didn't sob. She breathed like someone who had just sprinted a long distance. And between those breaths, the silence of the penthouse returned as quickly as if the miracle had been pulled from the room. The storyteller knows some doors close chapters. Some doors hand down sentences. This door did both. That night, the air conditioner was once again the loudest sound in the penthouse. Leonard opened his computer not to type Hope T. He wrote other words, pilot batch compliance packaging name. Each word a nail hammered into the board where hope would be displayed. The bitter scent from Bethesda still lingered, clinging to the room's corner like an uninvited witness. It could not speak. But if it could, it might have whispered some gifts once placed on a counter go out the moment the lights turn on. Tomorrow the city would see something new on a billboard, and stories, as always, would choose whether to follow the lights or the warning. In a small room across the river, Ivy dropped the duffel on the floor, pulled the faded cotton handkerchief over her blanket, and whispered, "Keep it safe. Use it right." Tonight, those words were stored where no hand could reach. By morning, they might have to walk the street. The next morning, the city dressed itself in new billboards. Times Square lit up with an image, a bottle of Hope Tea, sleek as perfume, golden waves behind it. The words streaming across, "Rediscover your voice." A little girl smiled in the sunlight, lips flickering on a word too soft to hear. Leonard Sutton stood behind the glass of his midtown office, watching curves on the screen numbers climbing, colored lines crawling upward like vines against a wall. In the boardroom, leather chairs circled, marketing spoke of brand story, legal spoke of compliance, R&D lined up glittering tasting cups. Somewhere in one man's mind, the bitter scent of Bethesda had been replaced by the smell of ink on contracts. Boutique pharmacies began stocking up. At the front counter, bottles of Hope tea sat on small wooden pedestals under spotlight beams. Clerks, coached with a soft script, spoke slowly, a family-inspired remedy. Gentle, precious. Many families sold something real to buy something that sounded like magic. Video ads flooded phones. Morning shows invited Leonard Visionary, the man who gave voice back. He smiled to size pinning to his lapel a ribbon of manufactured gratitude. In the penthouse, Kara sat by the TV eyes following her father's face through another man's lens. She wasn't a child who read price tags, but she could smell. And this smell wasn't the bitter herb of Bethesda. When the ad ended with now available nationwide, Kara clicked it off. She turned to Leonard, just home, tie still straight. "That's not a miracle, Dad," she said, voice small but sharp as a pin. "It's a lie." For years, Leonard had learned to pass difficult words with one hand, motion, a rub, a sweep. "Sweetheart, people want hope. I'm giving it to them. You're selling it." Kara answered, not repeating an adult's phrase, but putting the right name on it. Leonard exhaled his smile, shifting into comfort shape. Sometimes the only way to help more people is to scale. Scale, the word, hung between them like a rope bridge. One side human, the other a chart. Day stacked upon day. Financial news cheered investors, called in emails broke like waves. One morning, applause filled Leonard's office, first quarter beating expectations. Headlines crowned him Savior Visionary, comeback from scandal to miracle. When asked about the first girl in Central Park, Leonard said, "I was taught by two girls to do the right thing." On live broadcast, it sounded noble. Off stage, it sounded like a seatbelt. Then the first scratch. A single email. No change. Customer service replied with textbook words. "Every body is different." The next day, 3 more. The next week, a line. A video of a mother holding her son before a webcam, eyes red. "We sold our car, no difference." A doctor's voice on radio. There is no scientific proof. A status photo, the bottle set against a debt bill. Legal, reassured, outlier complaints. PR, crafted lines. "We care, we're studying," Leonard repeated in the hum of habit, "it will pass." But wrong things rarely pass when their names are real people. Hashtags sparked, clips piled. An elderly woman wheezed. "This took my pension." A father shook his head, "I believed too hard." The press turned. Golden hope. Tea bottles now placed beside tired faces. An attorney general's office opened a file. Lawyers knocked with class actions thick as phone books. The stock didn't fall, it slid. And in sliding, a new unit appeared: reputation. It doesn't measure in percentage points. That night, Leonard paced the library like a caged beast. He flicked the lights on, then off, then on again. He poured a glass of whiskey, drank, tasted nothing. He told himself, "They don't understand scale." But midway, he heard Kara's words. "It's a lie. Some sentences are too simple to argue against." He set the glass down, fingertips on the desk's edge, the wood grain rising like memory. Bethesda steps, shattered glass, bitter air. The penthouse returned to the house of air conditioners. Kara walked the hall, paused at the library's threshold, not entering. Some rooms keep children out, not for furniture, but for vocabulary. She looked at him as one looks at someone falling unsure where to reach without being pulled down, too. Then she turned, went to her room, turned off the light. A new voice once found chose silence tonight. By morning, the curve on the screen had lost its grip, fallen into a cliff. Times Square still glowed, but the light wasn't strong enough to cover bitterness. By evening, the boardroom emptied. Friends called less friendly, allies called busy. Leonard sat alone breathing inside the room called Definition the Office, and suddenly realized a home is not defined by leather chairs. That night, rain struck the glass wind shifted its face, and at the gate came a knock. The gate opened wind, whipping the raincoat tight against the small figure on the porch. Ivy Brooks. Her face was wet with rain, but her eyes were dry. Leonard came out a beat later than a man who had always arrived first. "You came back," he said, his voice unable to find a coat to wear. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have shoved, stewart, paid, shut the door." 3 verbs crowded under his tongue, none making it out whole. Ivy looked straight at him. "I knew from day one you only wanted the recipe," she said, each word laid down like a brick. "So I gave you a false one." The wind snapped, tugging the curtains once. Leonard tilted his head back, laughing dry as a knife slicing an unripe apple. "You tricked me." "You tricked everyone," Ivy replied. Not loud, exact. Kara ran in hair plastered to her forehead. Breath broken. "Dad, stop." "Listen." She stood between 2 adults, one who hadn't yet had the chance to grow up, one who had grown only in the direction of a skyline. No executives here. Only a father and a girl holding the key to something sacred. Ivy zipped her raincoat, her voice calm, not from calmness, but from choice. "I'll give you the real recipe." Leonard's face shifted as fast as a changing screen. "Good. We'll fix the PR, Ivy cut him off on one condition." She left a silence between sentences just long enough for him to hear the word he'd hate. "You give it away. For free." The wind dropped a notch as if someone had turned a dial. What Leonard said, but the question needed no answer. It only needed time to adjust to a new definition. You put a price on hope. "That's why it stopped working," Ivy said. "Some things break the second you barcode them." Kara looked at Leonard. "This is your chance. Not to be a genius, to do right." Some sentences reset the axis with only 2 words. Do right, the perfect mirror of scale. On one side, people. On the other, units. Leonard leaned against the doorway, sleeves wet with rain. He had rehearsed hundreds of speeches. Tonight he had none. Images returned like a crowd without tickets. The bottle breaking at Bethesda Daddy the Duffel shoved into Ivy's hands the mother's face. In the clips, the chart, drop the slamming door. One sentence he had dodged all his life wrote itself, "I was wrong." It weighed more than any number he had ever signed. It was lighter than what he was about to release. "I've been ambitious all my life," he said, voice rasping, as if poured through sandpaper. "I lied, I hid, I used people as ladders, I thought money could name miracles." He looked at Kara, then at Ivy. "I was wrong." The wind pushed through the hall, snuffing a candle on the cabinet. No one lit it again. They stood in a darkness just enough to see the light in each other's eyes. Ivy nodded, not granting forgiveness cheaply, only opening a door. "Then you'll do it this way," she said, voice steady without rising. "We make it right, we brew it right, we keep it clean, we give it away." Leonard swallowed down an old habit, bargaining with good terms. He didn't bargain. Okay, he said the word bear as a signature without letterhead. Kara stepped forward, took Ivy's hand, then placed her other hand in Leonard's. 3 unfamiliar hands stood together in the doorway of a familiar house. Outside, rain kept drumming, but rain's habit is to pass. Inside, people's habit is to change if they choose. That night, the factory received a call to convert production. A manager stammered. "Cost center," Leonard answered. "No center. Just do it." Legal drafted an unusual memo. "We will distribute free of charge." PR went silent for half a day. Some stories only need someone else's camera. Before bed, Ivy wrote on a sheet of paper, sage mint picked at dawn, fresh ginger grated, wild honey, chamomile, simmer exactly 7 minutes, cool in glass, drink right away. At the bottom, she didn't sign her name. She wrote her grandmother's 4 words, not for selling, for giving. The paper sat on the desk like the official record of something sacred. Leonard looked at it the way one looks at a birth certificate of a child he hadn't fathered, but had to raise right. He glanced up. Kara leaned against Ivy's shoulder, both girls yawning at once. "Thank you," he said the simplest, hardest words. Ivy nodded. "Keep it safe, use it right." Upstairs, the lights dimmed, leaving a thin golden line in the kitchen. There, tomorrow, water would boil, leaves would swirl, the scent would rise. There, an old miracle would choose a new home, the home of giving, not selling. The storyteller knows nights of turning often use few words. They only carry one sound, the sound of habit falling off the shoulders. And in the morning when the city opened its eyes, the gears would turn in a direction no business school chart had ever taught the direction of making it right. That morning, the factory whistles in the suburbs rang earlier than usual. The plant that once molded bottles priced like jewelry lit its lamps not to shine, but to do right. Leonard Sutton walked the concrete hallways, hands-free, no tablet tucked under his arm, no forecast charts in hand. Beside him was Ivy Brooks, her thin coat fluttering in the draft of the machines, and a step behind was Cora, eyes wide as if counting every bulb overhead. The main brewing room warmed under low flame. The tall steel vats still stood there cold and gleaming as always, but today the fire was not for steel. Ivy touched the brand-new enamel pots, rows of glass jars rinsed with boiling water, a stopwatch strapped to a worker's wrist. Glass, not metal. She reminded voice as even as a measuring line and listened to the simmer. Gentle. Trays of sage and mint, still damp with morning dew, were carried in. Fresh ginger grated sharp enough to sting eyes, wild honey glowed like threads of sun, pale chamomile swayed in its basket. Ivy moved through the scents, pointing, listening, attuning her ear to the bubbling that whispered instead of shouting. Not too loud, not sleepy, she said. An older worker nodded, his hands, long used to twisting knobs now, learning to translate the word gentle into numbers. 7 minutes were timed. As the final tick came, Kara whispered along as though counting the blinks of a newly found star, 6-7. They poured into glass. Wooden caps tightened without a snap like a secret kept. The label no longer dripped with gold letters. Only one thin black line, Hope Tea, not for selling. For giving. Leonard touched the word for realizing for the first time it weighed heavier than profit. A foreman asked softly, "Distribution channel." Leonard turned to Ivy. She answered like reciting a calendar. Hospitals, schools, community centers, free clinics, shelters, addresses outside advertising routes but always known by real voices. The first shipment was sealed and loaded onto a plain white truck. No floor-to-ceiling logos, no jingles blaring. Kara marked each crate with her pen as if marking the days she had waited for her voice. Ivy stood nearby, hands clasped, watching each pallet leave like letters posted to the right names. The day unraveled like a film played fast. In the Bronx, a community clinic placed the first bottles on an old wooden counter. A mother pushed in a stroller, hands trembling between hope and fear. A nurse poured a small cup, the child sipped a nose, wrinkling at the bitterness, before smiling at the honey aftertaste. An hour later, in a toy-worn room, the child's lips stirred. Ma. The syllable fine as hair, strong as rope. The mother sank to the vinyl floor, clutching her child like a season of rain had just broken. A phone light blinked red, the video spread no captions needed. At a shelter, an injured ex-worker who had lost his voice for years accepted a cup with scarred hands. He didn't drink right away. He watched the steam rise as if waiting for something long lost to return. Then a sip. And then a faint melody slipped through his lips, the tune of a song he'd learned at 12. Not loud, but true. The room went silent, like strings being tuned again. At a public school, a curly-haired girl practiced speech with her therapist, the cup beside a box of colored sticks. "We'll try again," the teacher said, not promising, just present. That noon, the whiteboard gained 2 new words. "Hi, Mom." She erased and rewrote them twice, not for spelling, but to stretch the joy of seeing words being born. The news found its own path. No overcut features, only shaky phone clips, 2 sentences, 1 new sound. He said, "Mom." She hummed. "We didn't pay." Fewer bitter comments. More nods from people who knew what right smelled like. A journalist dropped the lawsuit brief and rewrote her lead. Sometimes repair looks like a factory turning into a kitchen. In the Sutton living room, Kara and Ivy watched a screen split in 4 Bronx, Queens, Newark, Yonkers. Unfamiliar faces, familiar arms clutching miracles they hadn't dared believe. Leonard stood behind them, hand resting on the back of a chair like gripping a ledge, reminding himself not to push forward. Every time a new word burst from somewhere else, his shoulders lowered, just slightly, a kind of lightness not listed in his dictionary. Legal's phone buzzed, a class action withdrawn. The AG's office announced it was monitoring the giveaway program. PR forwarded a link, an article without spin, just 3 photos, a slim labeled glass bottle, a child laughing upward, a rough hand resting gently on a small back. Leonard didn't forward it. He printed it and taped it in the kitchen beside the 7-minute timer. By dusk, the factory dimmed, leaving only a golden band in the brewing area. Ivy walked the tables, checking caps, listening to the bottles clink softly, not harsh. Kara followed, noting in her ledger, Hospital 80, School 140, Center 60. Leonard watched them both the way one watches rails being reset in the right direction. Inside him, one debt cleared the debt of "I must be the author." He accepted being the carrier. Late at night, the 3 sat in the kitchen under weak light. The adults' tea cooled in cups. Kara's glass of milk stood half full. Ivy pulled out yesterday's sheet, adding in pencil at the margin, "Hospitals first. Schools next. Always free." She underlined, "always," like closing the final lock. Leonard stared at that word the way one looks at a promise with no reward but truth. He nodded, not reassured but grateful to finally meet it. Before bed, Kara turned back and hugged her father. A hug without words. Ivy stood at the doorway, smiling softly, saying one line like the cadence at the end of a chapter. "Now you know having a voice is not about how loud, it's about who it reaches." Leonard answered very quietly, "I know." Perhaps for the first time, his "I know" wasn't followed by "I control." Outside, the city still blared with horns and lights, but in small kitchens and waiting rooms at scratched school desks, voices sprouted like grass after rain. An old miracle had chosen a new home, the home of giving. And the factory once trained to count in units sold now learned to count in lives touched. It was the costliest lesson no one ever paid for. A month passed, and the city changed seasons as if the whole story had been rewritten. Thank you letters arrived instead of subpoenas. Clips of children laughing replaced stock charts dropping. When an invitation came from a major business conference, Leonard didn't ask about the speaker's fee. He asked only one thing. "They come with me, Kara and Ivy." The organizers paused for 5 seconds, then agreed, as if they had just understood the point. The auditorium shone like daylight. Spotlights hung from the ceiling, seats fanned out in arcs, the screen behind the stage waiting for a name. Leonard stepped out with the stride of a man who knew he owed. Ty's straight eyes slightly wet, the kind of wet that comes from learning a hard word. Applause arrived by reflex. He raised a hand for silence, not rushing for the microphone as before. "I'm not the hero here," he began without preface. "For years, I believed money could name miracles. I put a price on hope. It broke. 2 girls taught me to listen." Behind him, 3 images lit the screen: Bethesda Terrace in golden water, a slim labeled glass bottle, a child's hand resting on a larger one. "Kara," he called, his voice catching on her name, "my daughter who taught me what a voice is for." Kara stepped up in a simple dress, flat shoes, hair tied back. She stood at her father's side, hand on his sleeve like a seatbelt before flight, and Ivy Brooks, who kept her grandmother's promise and refused to sell it. Ivy walked on stage, hoodie crisp face lit with unforced clarity. The hall rose naturally. Applause came short enough. Leonard stepped back half a pace, offering the mic. Kara looked down at the front row. Dark suits, bright glasses, then up at the lights, and spoke as clearly as she had said "Daddy" the first time a voice is a gift. It's not for lying or hurting. It's for changing lives. Some scribbled it into notebooks, some recolored a slide, but in a few hearts it stayed whole. Ivy took the mic steady, unshaken. She had spoken before to her grandmother, to small kitchens, to thin dreams. "My grandma said, some gifts stop working the second you barcode them. Keep it safe, use it right, give it away." In a corporate hall, the line sounded like an equation without variables. A CEO in the third row lifted his eyes slowly, as if pulling from his wallet a card he no longer needed. Leonard returned, not closing with graphs. He looked at the room as he had looked at the factory that morning. "We didn't fix a PR problem. We repaired a promise." Repair a promise lit a new spark in minds once trained only to repair numbers. If you want to name what happened, don't put my name on it. Put theirs, and put yours if you choose to give. He smiled faintly. "I used to think growth was a number. It's a direction. Away from yourself." The hall stood again. Moisture touched the corners of eyes long dry at work. A journalist set her pen down as if laying aside a blade that no longer belonged. Applause came a second time, not for a finale but for a vow placed without signature. Afterward, the 3 walked backstage. Narrow corridor, white lights, hot wiring smell. Kara clung to Ivy's hand. Ivy placed her other hand in Leonard's. They said nothing loud. Kara whispered first, "We did the right thing." Ivy nodded. "We will keep doing it." Leonard added, not as a decision but as a promise. Always free, always clean. 4 words, like nails holding up a roof. That night, they walked through Bryant Park. String lights stretched across branches, green chairs scattered like notes. People read, ate, laughed. Kara's voice. "Dad." He turned. "Having a voice isn't how loud." Right, Leonard said without lecture. Ivy watched the stream of people passing, smiling softly. "It's who you hand it to." The 3 sat in a row without taking a picture. Days carried forward. The factory kept rhythm. The 7-minute timer never missed a second. Glass, not metal, became a proverb on the line. Leonard's business card didn't change his title. His work did. He spoke less where microphones multiplied enough, where lights were few. Kara read aloud at a neighborhood center, not long passages, just the right ones. Ivy returned to her grandmother's home, sorted the old story box, placed her photo on the kitchen shelf. Beneath it she wrote 4 words, in marker, "Not for selling. Forgiving." At last, because every story needs a last, Bethesda Terrace returned on a morning like the first. Water fell, a stone-warmed saxophone played a soft tune. Kara and Ivy sat on the steps, legs swinging, fingers touching the water. Leonard stood a little apart, phone silent. Ivy pulled from her pocket a small glass vial, no label, no bow. She placed it in Kara's hand. "For someone who needs it," she said. Kara nodded, clutching it like a story already understood. The two girls laughed, not because of a new miracle, but because the old one still had paths to walk. The storyteller will close the book here, not because the story is over, but because the rest follows a line already drawn when hope is given it finds its own way. When a voice is used right, it doesn't need to shout. It arrives where it belongs beside whom it should, saying what must be said. And if one day someone asks, "Is the miracle real?" lift a glass bottle to the light. Listen to the bubbling of 7 minutes and answer with 4 words, "Give, don't sell." The miracle is not in the bottle, but in how we use the voice when Leonard, Kara, and Ivy chose giving over selling hope found its way to the right people. If liquid gold were in your hands, what would you do to keep it safe and use it right? Give it away for free or put a price on it. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe with the bell on so you won't miss what comes next.